Is everything okay? You good? Okay. Okay, all right. Hang up. I can't keep track of all of those.
Oh yeah, we're not going to be able to have any media standing here. We're going to leave this whole area. We need to clear off this area over here too. Leave some room, please. Okay, we're going to need to make some room for the families to sit in here.
Test. 1, 2. Test. 1, 2. make sure when it's time to.
Can everyone please silence their phones? Give me just a second. Computers, volume off, please. Thank you.
At this hour, any minute now, LA County District Attorney George Gascon is expected to make a bombshell announcement on the fate of Eric and Lyle Menendez. Gascon is set to recommend the brothers be resentenced for the brutal 1989 murder of their parents, Jose and Kitty, at their Beverly Hills mansion. The brothers never denied carrying out these killings, but they said they were repeatedly sexually assaulted by their father and feared for their lives. You're taking a live look right now at where this news conference will be held. We understand the family members of Eric and Lyle Menendez are in the front row there, as well as their legal representation led by Mark Garagos, a famed attorney here in Los Angeles, who has been indicating that these boys, or these now men, should be released. Now, the new evidence that has been introduced could prove the indication that, in fact, the two boys, or the two men now, were in fact abused at the time. The case, of course, has been the subject of renewed public interest since the release of the recent Netflix documentary. Now, the new evidence includes a letter Eric Menendez wrote to his cousin indicating the abuse by his father. Also, recent news from a year ago that Ray Russello, a member of the band Menudo, was also allegedly molested by the father as well. Again, this has taken renewed interest, and keep in mind the backdrop of all this. We are less than 2 weeks away from an election where LA District Attorney George Gascon is on the ballot seeking re-election here, facing a strong candidate as well. So we'll see what he has to say as we hear from this announcement. But you just saw Mark Garagos right there in the newsroom, or the room where this news conference will be taking place, of course, packed with reporters there waiting for this announcement. And we have been expecting this all week long, with indications from the LA District Attorney's Office that a decision would be made this week, and in fact today. So here we go. We are expecting this announcement to be made shortly. Again, we are learning that LA District Attorney George Gascon is expected to ask for resentencing for Eric and Lyle Menendez. But again, we are going to hear the official announcement shortly, as reporters there in that news conference are expecting to hear from them. Now, we do know that the family members of the Menendez brothers have been advocates of this case, trying to get what they say is justice in this case, and they have been fighting for this for many, many years. Of course, renewed interest, again, because of the Netflix documentary and other recent highlights in the news surrounding this case, but a very different time from when this trial was presented to the current trial and public opinion now. So clearly it'll be very interesting to hear what, in fact, the LA District Attorney does have to say about this case, as well as family members' reactions afterwards. We do have Christina Gonzalez in that press conference room, who will give us up-to-date account of what exactly happened, all the reaction from after this announcement as well. But again, you're looking at photos from back then when, in fact, this trial was going on in 1989 is when this all happened. Again, Eric and Lyle Menendez claiming that they did, in fact, murder their parents. There's no denying that, but they say it was because of self-defense, and in self-defense of all the reprehensible actions that they say they endured during their lifetime as kids, as boys, growing up in that neighborhood. So Clearly, we are waiting. It's expected to happen any moment now. And again, we are waiting to hear from LA District Attorney George Gascon. All right, you see the family members of Eric and Lyle Menendez who have been vocal about this from the beginning. This has been years in the making, and now we are going to find out what exactly the opinion is. So we are learning right now that the family members are in fact meeting with the district attorney's office and prosecutors who, again, are expected to say that Eric and Lyle Menendez should be resentenced. Now, whether in fact that means that they have had time served and that they'll be free. Certainly their lawyer, Mark Garagos, was hoping for something like that to be announced, that Eric and Lyle Menendez would be home to celebrate Thanksgiving together as a freed person. But clearly we don't know that yet. And we're certainly going to see what this means in terms of resentencing, time served, or whether or not they'll get a different type of sentencing here. So clearly this is a big, big announcement, given the fact that this has grabbed headlines for decades, from when it happened in 1989 until the present day, certainly attracting the eyes of Hollywood with the documentary looking into this, and 2 trials into this case as well. The first inconclusive, and then a second trial which would not omit the fact that these brothers indicated that they were abused by the hands of their father. So 2 different cases being played out over the course of history when it comes to the judicial system servicing these boys, or these 2 men. So clearly this has been something that the family has been waiting for, and we'll certainly get an indication as to what the LA District Attorney is finally going to say about this, because this has been on their desk for quite some time. Again, the timeline and background of all of this is in fact an election year. So some people say that could be the difference here in terms of why this is a case of urgency. Okay, and we do know that the brother of Kitty Menendez, the mother in this case, has spoken out about this, against this whole thing being revisited. And Nathan Hochman, the challenger for the LA District Attorney's Office, I should say, has been saying that Gascon is using this case to promote his campaign again. So when we talk about the backdrop of all this, the bigger question here is this politically motivated? We don't know, but certainly this case getting another look here in current days, and different public opinion, obviously, surrounding this case, because the times are different. If you remember back in 1989 and throughout this trial, if you followed that, many people were saying that it is impossible for men to be sexually abused like this. It wasn't that common or spoken about. So clearly, again, a very different social climate we're talking about. But why did it take so long for this finally to come to fruition? That's certainly a question the LA District Attorney's Office's challenger, Nathan Hochman, is asking for, and he's wondering if this is all politically motivated, saying that this in fact is an election year stunt. So again, right now, as we wait for the LA District Attorney to come to talk to everybody about his announcement, we do understand that the family is speaking with him and meeting behind closed doors. We are getting an announcement that this is going to take place any moment now.
So we think we've covered that, but you will have a few opportunities, but not a ton. There's too many folks in here. Yes.
So there you heard a quick announcement of what is going to be taking place, that the LA District Attorney, George Gascon, will be coming out shortly, will be making his statement. I believe she mentioned that they're not going to do a bunch of Q&A back and forth here because there's just too many people right there, very crowded space. We'll see what plays out after this announcement, but clearly a big moment in time in history in terms of the judicial system and justice for what the family is hoping for, an announcement that Eric and Lyle Menendez may be resentenced in this case. Now, we just saw the family's attorney, Mark Garagos, walk out of that room. He is anticipated or expected to meet with Gascon as well before the actual announcement is made. But quite a different time as you look on the right of your screen. Back then when the trial was taking place, clearly quite a different social time as well, as we've been mentioning. So the climate certainly different, certainly politically charged right now, given the backdrop of an election just a couple of weeks away. And now this bombshell announcement set to be made any moment now. So again, we're waiting to see George Gascon walk out with the family members of Eric and Lyle Menendez, as well as their attorney, Mark Garagos, who are meeting behind closed doors right before this announcement set to be made. And again, we do have Christina Gonzalez in that room to talk about the climate there, the energy, what is being said, and of course reaction after this announcement will be made. But clearly we're not sure, or we don't anticipate many questions to be taken right after this announcement because of the fact that there are so many reporters in there and it is a confined space. We're not sure about the time limits involved in all of this, but clearly we will get reaction after all is said and done, including legal analysis after all this, because we do have Fox 11 in the evening that will be carrying this story. All right, and we did see the lawyer of the family being hugged by family members. So again, certainly this is a day and an announcement. If we're expecting to hear that they're both going to be resentenced, the day the family has been waiting for quite some time. So any moment now, we're expecting to see them walk out. Again, on the other side of this, though, we do know that Nathan Hochman, the challenger to George Gascon, is saying this is all politically motivated. Why didn't George Gascon move on this sooner? This has been on his desk for quite some time. And of course, given the Hollywood treatment of this whole case, all eyes are on the Eric and Lyle Menendez case in terms of the Netflix documentary and other public interests that have been surrounding these two brothers who have been behind bars for decades now. And it's uncertain what this resentencing will mean. Will it mean that they are free because of time served? Is that immediate? Will they be able to go home for Thanksgiving? That's certainly something their attorney, Mark Garagos, has been calling for. Or will that mean kind of a separate resentencing trial where we'll see if their sentence is shortened or not? So these are all the questions that are surrounding this announcement that's expected to begin any moment now, according to the instructions that we got just moments ago. But clearly a different time. And the brothers serving many, many years behind jail at this point, behind bars rather, at this point. So again, on the right side of your screen, you're looking at previous footage of when the trial was taking place, the brothers side by side at that point, and then certainly more recent pictures of them as they were behind bars for all these years. You're also seeing old pictures of the parents that we're talking about, Jose and Kitty Menendez, and they're from an affluent family in the Beverly Hills area. And we do know that the brothers were talked about spending lavish amounts of money after the parents' death, and that was something that was brought up during trial. You know, why did those boys do that so soon after their parents were deceased and had passed? So again, according at that time to the trial, they were saying, the prosecutors at that time were saying this was all for the money. However, inadmissible in court at that time during the trial were all of the allegations of abuse that Eric had laid out to his cousin, Andy, as well as other allegations of molestation, sexual abuse, and abuse at the hands of his father. So we do have Christine Devine on the phone right now who could weigh in on this bombshell announcement. Christine, I know you've been following this case very closely for many years.
Hi, Sandra. Yeah, please jump anytime you see the district attorney step up to the podium, as we all want to hear what he has to say. This really is a momentous time as we look at this case in a whole different light with the two projects that are out there in the media right now, the documentary on Eric and Lyle Menendez and the Netflix series as well. This case is being viewed in a whole different way. Yeah, Sandra?
Yeah, absolutely. The social climate's different. Some would argue the political climate is different. And the information that was admissible during the trial at that time was certainly different. They're talking about new evidence, which is why all of this is coming to light once again, Christine.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking back to the time I moved to Los Angeles to become a reporter at Fox 11. It was 1990. These murders happened in 1989. And as you were saying, their attorney, Mark Garagos, is not saying that they did not do the killing of their parents. That is indeed the case. But if the motivation was sexual abuse at the hands of their father, what kind of drive was that to fear for their lives? And that is what the argument is with Mark Garagos. He's saying that maybe they should have gotten a manslaughter case and not this murder case. And with these decades in prison, DA Gascon is saying, my office is looking at this, and he's quoted in People magazine as saying that some in my office think they question whether there was indeed the sexual abuse allegation. Is there a reality to that? And others are saying absolutely. And we've had, as you said, other things come to light that make us question that as being a possibility or reality. And we are viewing that in such a different way in this day and age. And the motivation or what that does to a person inside. So a lot to look at here if that is indeed the case. And there's this possible corroborating type of evidence where a band member of the group Menudo came forward saying that the father of Eric and Lyle Menendez had abused him. We know the father was in the entertainment business.
Right. Yeah, certainly all of this didn't come to light during the trial. And keep in mind, I want to mention the ages of Eric and Lyle. Eric is 55, Lyle is 56, already served many, many years behind bars. They were sentenced to life without parole in this second trial we're talking about that happened in 1996. So clearly, if there's a resentencing and if they are free, they still have a substantial time of life to live free outside of prison. So clearly this is something Mark Garagos, family members have been fighting for, but we're taking a live look inside where the news conference is set to happen, and we are looking at the back of a woman who has white hair. She's wearing a white shirt. That is, I believe, the sister of Kitty Menendez there, being comforted by a companion next to her. So clearly emotions are high here for so many people who have a stake in all of this. The family members, legal representatives, also given the fact that there's so much public interest surrounding this family for so many years. This is certainly a powerful scene to witness, and also a momentous, as you were saying, Christine, time, because history is being revisited in a very different light.
Yeah, and reminding our viewers that we are just waiting for the district attorney to step up to that podium. You are going to interrupt me at any moment when you have the visual on that. I have an eye on it as well, but if you get a closer heads up, please let me know. Yeah, you talked about family being there. So we have seen the news conference in recent days from family members of Eric and Lyle Menendez who are stepping up in support of these boys, saying they should be freed, they should be released. In fact, one relative said that one of the brothers had written her a letter about being abused by his father. And so that is part of the thing that's being in consideration here as well. But then you also have another family member who's saying, no, that it was out of greed, that the boys are going to be written out of their father's will, that was why they killed their parents. What was the motivation behind that, if that was the case? That's my question. So you do have family members on both sides, but a number of them stood up at this news conference and went before the microphone and said, the boys should be free. We as family members want them home and want them out. Let's talk about their time in prison right now. Both brothers have gotten married in prison. Eric has children, stepchildren, through one of his marriages. They are said to be model prisoners, according to their attorney, Mark Garagos, that they should be considered for good behavior and I believe DA Gascon was quoted in People magazine as also saying that they have had good behavior and, quote, they do not pose a threat to society. So a lot to consider for his office. Mark Garagos, their attorney, also said they brought this up about a year ago or so. While the accusation has been, is this a political issue for the DA right now? Garagos is saying, we filed papers over a year ago. We've been waiting for an answer on this.
Yeah, certainly it has been quite some time. And, you know, it's interesting because we kind of go to the fact, oh, the boys, right? Keep in mind, Lyle Menendez was 21, Eric Menendez 18 when they admitted to fatally shooting their parents. So very young. So that is why kind of the instinct is that they're brothers, young, you know, had their future ahead of them, and then this happened, totally turning their lives, their world upside down, their families' worlds upside down. And clearly, we've been following this case for 34 years now. They've served behind bars, again, sentenced to a life in prison without the possibility of parole. So that is why this is so major when we talk about resentencing. But Christine, hang on here, because we do have Christina Gonzalez inside that room where this is all about to take place. Christina, if you could hear me, what is the atmosphere like in there right now?
Well, hopefully you can hear me. I can't stand in front of the camera because we've got literally over 50 cameras inside a small room, so I'm behind them. But everybody has been waiting. Obviously, most of the family, except the woman you see in front, that's Joan Vandermolen. Now, Joan, that's Kitty Menendez's sister. As you mentioned, she has been very, very vocal. She's the only one who's not in the back room because she does walk with a walker. She has difficulty moving, so they would rather her stay sitting down. But she has been very vocal, saying to us, last time I talked to her, that, you know, if the case were tried today, the evidence of the father's abuse would not only be admitted in court, it would probably provide essential context as to why the Menendez brothers acted as they did. She does not believe a jury today would issue such a hard sentence. Now, with that said, her brother, who is not here today, Milton Anderson, he is represented by an attorney. He believes completely the opposite. What Milton has said is that he believes the brothers acted out of greed, that he has said on the record that they knew that their father was going to take them out of the will, and that when they found that out, they went out and bought the shotguns and shot both of them, including a reload, before trying to make sure, quote unquote, as it was said in the trials, that Kitty was dead. Now, I covered both trials, and I have to say, in the first trial, the evidence of sexual abuse was allowed. We heard really riveting, tearful testimony about the sexual abuse that was alleged at that point. We even heard from, you talked about a letter earlier that was written that is part of the new evidence. That cousin that letter was written to by Kyle Menendez was up on the stand, and he did say that he had been told about the sexual abuse. He never mentioned a letter about it, but he did talk about it. What happened is that that first trial ended up in a deadlock, and they went to a second trial. And in that second trial, the judge did not allow the evidence of, or any talk about sexual abuse, saying that there was no real proof that there had been any other than people saying it had. And that is when they were convicted, and thus serving life in prison. So what Gascon has said, and what the attorneys for the family who would like to see them walk out of prison tomorrow, if they could, is that the new evidence includes a letter that Kyle supposedly wrote to his cousin, and telling him and detailing the abuse that was never allowed into evidence. And that would, in essence, prove supposedly that he wasn't making it up when he stood up in the stand and talked about it. And the other one is the testimony later on by one of the band members from Menudo. And to counter that, what what the people who don't believe it say is that, and I do remember this, there were people on the stand in the first trial family members who said that the brothers had tried to convince them to come forward with false allegations against their father. So there's always that saying, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And sadly, this has broken down this family into very distinct bands. And at this point, though, I can tell you that it does look like Gascon is going to ask for a resentencing. Now, what does that mean? Keep in mind that there was supposed to be a hearing about this in December. This was all supposed to happen in December. So why is Gascon making the announcement not only before the election, which is hotly contested, but also even before the Dodgers start taking over all the media attention tomorrow? That is what detractors like the brother of Kitty Menendez is saying.
Yeah.
There's no question that this is, in his mind at least, an effort to get votes. And in that way, it is successful at least in getting attention because, like I said, you've got media here from all around the world. I have not seen this kind of media grouping barely fitting into this room. And I wish I could show it to you, but we can barely turn our camera around in a very long time. There's so close to 300 journalists just packed together in this room.
From all around the world. It's gained worldwide attention, this headline-making case. So clearly, yes, that's why all eyes are on this announcement right now. And Christina, you made a good point because you were mentioning the attorneys for Milton Anderson, the 90-year-old brother of Kitty Menendez. He actually filed a legal brief asking the court to keep the brother's original punishment. So yes, as you were mentioning, there are detractors from all this. And in this legal briefing, he says, you know, they shot their mother, Kitty, reloading to ensure her death. And according to his attorneys, they say the evidence remains overwhelmingly clear. The jury's verdict was just and the punishment fits the heinous crime. So even though we're talking a lot about the sympathetic views surrounding this case, given the different social time right now, there are detractors, as you were mentioning. This really divided this family up, obviously, and now is the big question, you know, the timing of this as well. Not only is this something, you know, Milton Anderson is hoping for in terms of gaining attention to this, but Nathan Hochman, the challenger to DA George Gascon, is questioning the timeline of all this. Christina.
Well, and I'll tell you, because in the last press conference, I tried to ask these questions because I had spoken to Anderson's attorney, and I tried to ask these questions of the family attorney. How many times have I spoken to Garagos? And he has always answered my questions, and he didn't on this case. And now, before this, you know, one of the things we have just been told is that there will be no questions after this press conference. And I will tell you, it's not because it's a room packed of reporters, because we have had many press conferences where we've had rooms packed of reporters and they have answered questions. At least that's my take on it and the take of all the media that is sitting here. So we're going to try to ask some questions simply because the other side, as happy as I know this side of the family is, and as strong a point as they make that the brothers are not a danger to society anymore, that they're going to, if they walk out of prison, have support system. They're not expected to commit crimes, that, you know, that they're going to have everything they need to be able to be members of society that would contribute to it. And let me digress a second, because the brothers have been very involved in the last, since they got into prison, and to be fair, they thought they were going to spend the rest of their lives in prison. They've been very involved in programs to help people with sexual abuse. Most people would tell you that you would do that if you didn't really want to, just because you want to get out. These men did not think they were going to get out for a very long time, because the efforts have been ongoing and they have been shot down because the trial was strong. But as you have said, and we have mentioned, times have changed. The point of view of men talking about sexual abuse and how that is perceived by the public is different. And that is something that I think Gascon is counting on, to be sympathetic, that people will say, you know what? Let's look at the whole picture. What would I have done if I had been in that situation? Which is a very difficult question. I remember talking to one of the jurors after the first trial, and the points they made, which we talked about a lot back then, was they were adults. And you can see the family coming in and kind of, as more and more family is arriving. Most of them are in the back room, but they're beginning to come out of the back room. So maybe, and hopefully, we'll be able to get this started soon, because they are beginning to come out of the back room where they were meeting. But to the point I was making, I remember talking to jurors saying, you know, they were adults. It's not like they were 15 years old. They could have gotten out. One of them had gone to Princeton. They could have just said, you know, no more, leaving. And of course, you can never say what you're going to do. I'm just making the point of what people said, because it's such a horrible thing to even think about. And the descriptions of the abuse were horrible. There's very little question that their father was a very controlling man, that his father was a very difficult man. And that alone was pretty evident.
Right.
Now, and it was allowed into testimony. It was just an issue of the sexual abuse. That became the needle, as it were, the line in the sand.
And as we continue,
that's what they're saying should have been allowed.
As we continue, Christina, thank you for that insight. To watch your live picture as family members start entering this room, we're expecting pretty much, hopefully, that the announcement will be made shortly. But I want to bring in Christine Devine, who's been hanging on, listening to all of this commentary. Also, you were here during the time of all this back in 1995. Let's go a year before this trial was even in the headlines. We were talking about the O.J. Simpson trial, and that was a very different verdict. But again, public sentiment around the judicial system, around prosecutors, around what the outcome was on that case. And then a year later to be followed by this. I mean, the public climate around that time, and this was before, you know, court TV, before we had all of these splashy trials that people were following day in and day out. These were the two headline-grabbing cases of that time. But again, a very different social time. I wonder, Christine, if you could take me back to that time and just the public attitude towards watching justice in motion, and if people felt that justice was being served.
Let me just say, Christina Gonzalez gave great insight as she had covered these cases. Christina, I think, is perhaps the longest employee at Fox 11, been there even longer than I have, and I've been there 34 years. So she really has great perspective as to what's going on here. And let me just take you back to when this crime happened in 1989. It was shocking. A crime, a double murder in Beverly Hills, a husband and a wife gunned down in their home with no suspect in mind at the moment. People were terrified that a crime like this could happen. There was a thought, was it a mob hit? Who would have done something like this? There was true fear. Now, you mentioned the O.J. Simpson case. When O.J. Simpson was cleared by the jury, there was some thought that the district attorney's office needed a win. And they got this win with the Eric and Lyle Menendez case. But now, Sandra, I'm thinking of all the generations who did not live through this era, who are just hearing about this perhaps on the Netflix series or news stories. They didn't live this era. But there have been so many cases about sexual abuse. We're talking Epstein, Cosby, Weinstein, you know, a lot of different cases that have been brought to light. The Diddy case right now about sexual coercion or abuse. And I think that our eyes are open to it in a whole different way, where we didn't talk about these things. How much did Kitty Menendez know or not know? But the thing is there truth to what Eric and Lyle are saying? Is there enough evidence to possibly give it some truth? And that's really what's weighing here on the DA's office with this letter from that was written to the relative from Eric and Lyle Menendez, that their father was abusing them. And the band member from Menudo, to me, that was a true game changer. If this band member is coming forward saying that he was abused by the father who was in the entertainment business, now with all those cases where I just painted a picture of where we know much more about the concept of abuse and the church abuse cases we've covered and those settlements, I think there's a tendency to say, well, maybe it's worth a look. Maybe I didn't know enough about this topic. And I've had a young man who's been calling me who was in one of these church abuse cases, and he and his brother were victimized, and he called me and said, I wanted to kill my abuser. I didn't. I turned it internal. I used drugs. I used alcohol. I went to rehab. I suffered internally in a great way. So he has an eye on this case as well. So it's bringing up a lot of different things, and we just hope that the right decision is made. And I just want to remind people, this is not that they would be found guilty. That's not the ask. Can they be resentenced with perhaps the charge being manslaughter? Again, not that they're not guilty. That
Right.
is not the issue here at hand.
Right. As we've all been saying, yes, the issue is not, in fact, did they do the crime? They admitted that they did, but the reason behind it, right, that wasn't permissible in the court of law back then, now came to light, and clearly a different social period. Christina, we see some action inside that room. Is this about to begin?
And there have been several times where we've seen people beginning to walk up, but I do see Garagos beginning to walk out in such a way that he is escorting family members out, and that is what he has usually done in the past as they are about to begin. These were the family members who we've seen speaking about this before, and they're actually from all over the country.
There we see George Gascon.
They flew in a couple of weeks ago, and there's George Gascon saying hi to Joan. And so I do believe this is going to start at any moment. Let's see if it does. I'm going to let him approach the podium and let him get started.
All right. Thank you so much, Christina. We'll check back in with you. And Christine Devine, thank you so much. Now we have the LA District Attorney George Gascon in front of the microphone there, expected to make this bombshell announcement. Let's listen.
Before I begin speaking, I want to also introduce some other people that are here with me, and I hope I'm pronouncing the names right because I've seen handwritten part of it. But I have Ana Maria Barat, Jose Menendez, Jose Menendez and niece Karen Vandermolen, and Katie's niece. They're all here with us. Also with us here is Brock Lunsford. He's the Assistant Head Deputy for the Post-Litigation Conviction Unit, and Nancy Cervier, who is the Deputy District Attorney in charge of the Resentencing Unit. Let me begin by telling you that this is a case where we've had many people in this office spend a great deal of time reviewing the case. I have to tell you unequivocally that we don't have a universal agreement. There are people in the office that strongly believe that the Menendez brothers should stay in prison the rest of their life, and they do not believe that they were molested. And there are people in the office that strongly believe that they should be released immediately and that they were in fact molested. I have to tell you that after a very careful review of all the arguments that were made for people on both sides of this equation, I came to a place where I believe that under the law, resentencing is appropriate, and I am going to recommend that to a court tomorrow. What that means in this particular case is that we're going to recommend to the court that the life without the possibility of parole be removed and that they will be sentenced for murder, which, because there are two murders involved, that will be 50 years to life. However, because of their age, under the law, since they were under 26 years of age at the time that these crimes occurred, they will be eligible for parole immediately. The teams that have worked on this, on the resentencing side of it, have spent literally probably hundreds of hours by now looking at this case. These cases were originally presented on the habeas side of it, which I'll explain in a moment what that is, last year, and then the request for a prosecutor-initiated resentencing occurred earlier this year. And there have been people in this office working in these cases from the very beginning, as well as many other cases that we have. The reason why I'm here today and why I came in front of all of you about 10 days ago is because there was a more recent documentary about the case that again brought a tremendous amount of public attention. And we know there have been other documentaries, so this is not the first, this is the more recent one. And frankly, our office got flooded with requests for information And even though this case was already scheduled to be heard in late November, I decided to move this forward because, quite frankly, we did not have enough resources to handle all the requests. And one of the things that I thrive to do in this office is to be very transparent in everything that we do. In this case, we review the prison files. And you have to understand that the way the process works, when you're talking about a resentencing under the law, it really focuses not necessarily on what the original crimes were, but it focuses on, has the person been rehabilitated, number one, and number two, can they be released safely into the community? Under that rubric, since I've been in office, we have resentenced over 300 people, including 28 for murder. Only 4 have reoffended. If that was a regular recidivism rate in this country, we would be the safest nation in the world, but we know that it's not. In fact, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the people that go to prison reoffend and get rearrested. And that's why we have so many problems. However, when you look at the case of the Menendez brothers, you see 2 very young people, one was 19 and the other one was 21, when they committed these horrible acts. And I want to underline, they were horrible acts. There is no excuse for murder, and I will never imply that what we're doing here is to excuse that behavior, because even if you get abused, the right path is to call the police, seek help. But I understand also how sometimes people get desperate. We often see women, for instance, that have been battered for years, and sometimes they will murder their abuser out of desperation. And I do believe that the brothers were subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation. But they went to prison for life without the possibility of parole, which meant that certainly under the law at that time, they had no hopes of ever getting out. They could have done what many other people do, which is basically said, you know what, I'm here for the rest of my life, so I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to misbehave, I'm going to join gangs, I'm going to live the life of the prison. But they never did that. To the contrary, even though they didn't think that they would ever be let free, they engaged in a different journey. A journey of redemption and a journey of rehabilitation. And often the people that begin their journey of rehabilitation and redemption in prison is often very internal in what they do, and one of our lawyers pointed out this today, is usually the path is people try to further their education, do things for self-improvement, which the brothers have done, by the way. But it's more unique or less usual, I guess, when people not only do that, but they also begin to engage in ways to make life for others better. And in this case, the brothers have been doing so for a very long time, creating groups to deal with how to address untreated trauma, creating groups to deal with other inmates that have physical disabilities and may be treated differently. Even in one case, Lyle negotiating for other inmates as to the conditions that they live under during prison. And all this was done by 2 young people, now they're not as young, that had no hopes of ever getting out of prison. They have been in prison for nearly 35 years. I believe that they have paid their debt to society, and the system provides a vehicle for their case to be reviewed by a parole board, and if the parole concurs with my assessment, and it will be their decision, they will be released accordingly. I must underline, however, this case will be filed in court tomorrow. The final decision will be made by the judge. Court has to agree with my conclusion that they deserve to be resentenced. It is very possible that there may be members of this office that will be present in court opposing the resentencing. And they have a right to do so. And we encourage those that disagree with us to speak, and the court is the appropriate place to do it. We certainly feel we're very sure not only that the brothers have rehabilitated and that they will be safe to be reintegrated in our society, but that they have paid their dues, not only for the crimes that they committed, but because of all the other things they have done to improve the life of so many others. So, again, we will be filing for resentencing tomorrow. We're seeking that they would be sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, as opposed to life without the possibility of parole, which is they currently have. That means that they would have 50 years to life because there were 2 murders. But because of the age upon which they were convicted, under 26, under current law, that means they're eligible for youthful parole. I think there is also important to have some introspection today, because I think that often, for cultural reasons, we don't believe victims of sexual assault, whether they're women or whether they're men. We saw in our first trial, which, by the way, they were tried twice. The first trial hung, meaning the jury could not come to a conclusion, and in fact, about half of the jury wanted to convict them of manslaughter, which, if that were have been the case, they would have been off prison a long time ago. And then there was a second trial, and then they were convicted of murder with special circumstances, which led to the life without the possibility of parole. But it's salient to understand that our own implicit and sometimes explicit bias around sexual abuse and sexual assault often leads us to severe injustices in our community. And I want to speak to those that are victims of sexual assault now, whether you're a man or a woman. Know that we're here for you. If you're a victim of sexual assault in this community, and by that we're talking about LA County, not just LA City, you can come for help. Whether you're prepared to prosecute or not, we will be here for you. We have services for you. And if you're prepared to move forward with the prosecution, we will evaluate it as we do any other case. And if we believe that the evidence is there to present a credible case in front of a jury that can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, we will proceed accordingly. You do not have to suffer alone. You don't have to keep it to yourself. And help is here unconditionally. I'm going to say a few words in Spanish because I know there's tremendous amount of interest from the Spanish media, and I know that there are going to be other speakers today, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Primero que nada, quiero dar las gracias a todos por estar aquí hoy.
There you have it, LA County District Attorney George Gascon saying that he believes Eric and Lyle Menendez have paid their debt to society, serving nearly 35 years in prison, and that they should be released accordingly. By that, he is recommending resentencing to the court tomorrow, filing that motion, hoping that they will get life without parole removed from their case, and they will be sentenced to murder. He says that a murder charge would be given 50 years to life in prison, and given the fact that Eric and Lyle Menendez committed these crimes under the age of 26 at the time, that they would be eligible for parole immediately. That is the announcement made by LA County DA George Gascon today. So he will be actually entering this in court tomorrow. So a big decision here. Obviously, a judge will make the final decision in all of this. And George Gascon flanked by members of the Menendez family, some getting emotional as he was making that announcement. Behind him, you can see the members who have been fighting for this, supporting this, members of the family. And Gascon saying that the two men, Eric and Lyle, the brothers, have been model citizens behind bars, helping other inmates, negotiating for their conditions in prison. They have obviously, by their behavior, he says, have been on a journey of redemption and rehabilitation, and that is why he is offering to make this claim in court tomorrow. Again, deciding to resentence Eric and Lyle Menendez. So let's go to Christine Devine, who has been listening on the phone to all of this as it's been playing out. Christine, what do you take away from all of this?
Sandra, this is a wow and wow to hear this out of the mouth of the district attorney. Now, we've been talking about this being a possibility that Eric and Lyle Menendez would be resentenced and that they would possibly be home for Thanksgiving, per their attorney, Mark Garagos, who was on our 6 o'clock show with Marla, saying, I hope to have them over my house for Thanksgiving. That was a shocker to hear that. It made it seem so very real. And there you heard the words right there from DA George Gascon. He says, my office is divided on this. Some people believe that there was molestation, that there was dysfunction in the home. He says others do not. He goes, I believe it, that there was molestation in the home. Now, really, I think this is going to take Los Angeles by storm, because a lot of people have been watching this case due to the new documentary, which is worth a watch, the show, the series on Netflix. There are a lot of new eyes on this case. Some people never lived through this era. And you could probably get more insight from Christina Gonzalez, who covered this case back in the 1990s. And just to hear this news from the district attorney, he's going to ask for resentencing, is really quite a shocker, but not, because we've been covering it. And one thing that also stood out to me, he said his office has resentenced 300 people, 4 have reoffended, but 300 people have had resentencing under this district attorney. Sandra?
Yeah, that was something that stood out to me too, Christine, that, 300 people resentenced, 28 for murder and 4 actually reoffended after that. But he says that is a good statistic at this point, all considering. But I do want to mention that Nathan Hochman, the challenger in the DA's race, given the backdrop of all this, election is just 2 weeks away, and George Gascon is facing this opponent right here. They released a statement, his campaign, saying about this decision, questioning the timing of this decision just days before the November 5th election. And Hochman is a former federal prosecutor, obviously running as an independent against DA George Gascon. And in his statement, he says, quote, DA George Gascon received the Menendez habeas corpus petition in May 2023 as a request, and yet he has waited just days before the election. Let's listen into this woman right now.
Seated. Joan Vandermolen is here, Kitty's sister, as well as Diane Vandermolen Hernandez, Kitty's niece. Thank you for joining me, everyone. Today is a day filled with hope for our family. We are here because District Attorney Gascon has taken a brave and necessary step forward by recommending a resentencing for Lyle and Eric. The DA's decision reflects the truth that is hidden for so long, and I am grateful for his leadership in making this choice. We stand united in our hope and gratitude. Together, we can make sure that Eric and Lyle receive the justice they deserve and finally come home. Thank you to District Attorney George Gascon for his courage and leadership. This step gives us all hope that the truth will finally be heard and that Lyle and Eric can begin to heal from the trauma of their past. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah.
I believe Jose Menendez is going to say a few words.
This is the niece of Kitty Menendez,
I'm sorry.
Joan Vandermolen.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for coming. We are here today because District Attorney Gascon has taken a brave and compassionate step forward by recommending resentencing for my cousins, Eric and Lyle. And we wish to offer our deepest gratitude to DA Gascon. This decision is not just a legal matter. It is a recognition of the abuse my cousins endured, and we are grateful for the DA's leadership in putting justice over politics. We know this wasn't an easy decision, but is the right one. This is about truth, justice, and healing. It is time for Lyle and Eric to come home. And I ask all of you to join us in this fight for justice. We stand united in our hope and in our gratitude. Together we can make sure that Eric and Lyle receive the justice they deserve and finally come home. Thank you again to District Attorney George Gascon for his courage and leadership. This step gives us all hope that truth will finally be heard and Eric and Lyle can begin to heal from the horrors of their past. We hope this will also shed light and increase awareness and help others who have been victimized by sexual violence. Thank you all so much for being here today. We are grateful for everyone's support.
Is there anyone else speaking?
No, that's it.
Okay. Okay, and I apologize. I'm reading notes here and I'm trying to understand all the notes. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain, so you go tomorrow, you file a case for resentencing, then what happens after? Are the brothers going to be there tomorrow, and when is the role of the parole board going to come in?
Right, and you know what? I'm going to actually have the people that are handling the case walk you through all of it. The brothers will not be there tomorrow. The role of parole board comes later, but Nancy, why don't you walk everybody through?
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll file our...
Say your name, your name and your title.
My name is Nancy Theberge. I'm the deputy in charge of the resentencing unit. This is Brock Lunsford, assistant head deputy of the post-conviction litigation division. So what will happen is tomorrow we will file the actual petition requesting resentencing with the legal arguments and accompanying exhibits as to why we think it's appropriate. It's just a filing. No one's going to physically be in the courtroom. From there, we'll also serve the defense with our motion and our paperwork so that they'll have their copies. And from there, we will coordinate with the defense to set up a court date with the court so that the petition can be heard. Now, whether or not that's a setting or a hearing will be decided between us and the defense and the court once everybody gets an idea of what we've filed. Then from there at the hearing, the defense can either decide to have the defendants, the Menendez brothers, physically brought into court. They can ask that the individuals appear by video or audio WebEx, a kind of a Zoom participation, which we all kind of adapted to because of COVID. And then from there, we will do the hearing and submit all the written and legal and oral arguments and any evidence that needs to be admitted at the time, and then the court will rule at that point. But we don't have that court date yet because we're just starting the process tomorrow. But it's our intention to have that go forward before the habeas, because if the judge grants it, that may impact the defense's decision to proceed on the habeas. So we're gonna try it just as a matter of economy of time to stack it one before the other.
Now, have the brothers found out about this in real time, or were they told about this beforehand, or what was their reaction?
No, this was...
No, this is actually the family was only invited to come. They were not aware what the final decision was until a few minutes ago. The brothers may be actually seeing you guys on TV or social media, but no one knew other than a very small number of people in this office. And by the way, I should tell you that actually the final decision was just made about an hour ago.
the judge ruled in favor.
Right. Then it goes back to the prison system, and then the parole system takes over that. That's correct.
Would there be a parole or probationary period? Would they have to live in a halfway house, or simply be released if they're allowed to be released?
You know, those are really completely entirely up to the parole board. Place. We'll try.
What was the factor that made the final decision? You said the final decision was just made. Was it the letter? Was it the Menudo confession? What was it that put you over the top to make?
No, what it was is I was evaluating the arguments that were being made within my office, both pro and against the release.
DA, can I ask you?
Hold on, I had it.
Calls from people that
I'm, you know, you have made resentencing a cornerstone of your tenure as district attorney here in Los Angeles. There are some people who have accused you of using this very, very highly publicized, clearly case to use it for politics, given how close we are to the election. What's your response to people who have been making that claim?
There's nothing political about this. We have resentenced over 300 people, including 28 for murder. And we will continue to resentence people in the future. And that's all I can tell you.
But DA, question.
Yes, sir. Excuse me, please. You're interrupting.
Everyone's interrupting. I'm just wondering how your bid for re-election.
Yes, please. Yes.
Could the brothers be home by Thanksgiving?
I don't know the answer to that.
Why did you decide not to go with the reduced voluntary manslaughter?
That was part of the process that I was still going through up until a couple hours ago. I don't believe that a manslaughter would have been the appropriate charge given the premeditation that was involved in the murders. I believe that these were clearly murders that were premeditated. Now, the motivation, that's where, you know, differences of opinion come up, but I don't think it would be appropriate to go all the way down to manslaughter.
DA, yes, ma'am. Has your bid for re-election impacted?
Would you please stop? I am not going to talk about re-election, okay?
Okay. So
if you want to talk to re-election, go outside. We'll talk later. Please.
Relax.
It's a fair question.
No, it's not.
It is a...
I'm sorry, you're interrupting, sir.
Be respectful.
Please.
¿Qué va a pasar mañana después de que presenten en la corte un documento?
Pues depende, como estaba explicando la abogada, la encargada de esta unidad, la corte probablemente va a señalar otro día donde los dos, la defensa y nosotros podemos ir y habrá una evaluación de la evidencia, si hay alguien que se opone a esta moción que estamos, este proceso que estamos iniciando, también la Corte va a poder oír todo eso y la Corte toma la decisión final.
And there you heard LA County District Attorney George Gascon taking questions after saying he wouldn't be taking questions after his announcement. And let's go back because he is continuing to take questions from reporters.
The potential successor undo what you're about to file?
I don't think so. Once it's filed, it's up to the court to take it from there.
You mentioned...
Yes, I'm sorry.
In a parole situation, obviously you have a policy of not sending DAs to those. Since you're obviously supporting the push for release here, how would that work? Would people from post-mitigation resentencing, would they go before the parole board to argue for their release? Or
No. We have a policy that we only send victim services advocate if the victim or the victim's family wants that support. We don't send lawyers to our parole boards to relitigate a case. The parole board is fully aware of what the initial crime was, the crime that led to the conviction. Their work is primarily to evaluate whether they're rehabilitated and safe to be released, and that will be the way here.
Can you break down the timeline for us? Can we expect a hearing by the end of the year?
Nancy, we don't know.
I'm hoping to get it on calendar, depending on the defense preparedness. I'd like to see it go to hearing probably within the next 30 to 45 days at the most. There's not much to argue.
Okay. There's one more question, please, but related to the case, not to elections. If you want to talk about elections, we'll do that. Yes, sir.
What would you like to say right now to Eric and Lyle Menendez?
What we like to say to them, and it's we, because it's not a, I made the final decision, obviously, but we have a whole team that worked on it. We have a family here that wants to be reunited, is that we appreciate what they did while they were in prison. While I disapprove of the way they handle their abuse, we hope that they not only have learned, which appears that they have, but that if they get reintegrated into our community, that they continue to do public good. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right, LA County District Attorney George Gascon wrapping up his announcement recommending the resentencing of Eric and Lyle Menendez. That will be certainly something the office plans to do in court tomorrow. And with that, that would mean life without parole. That initial sentence would be removed. It would be sentenced to murder. The two men would then face 50 years to life in prison. And since the crimes happened under the age of 26 at the time, the two men, Eric and Lyle Menendez, would be eligible for parole immediately if a judge decides to go with the recommendation. Of course, we'll have much more today at 4 o'clock on the early edition of Fox 11 News. Of course, we do have Cristina Gonzalez in the room right there where the announcement was made. We'll get reaction from her as well as an intensive report and also legal analysis of this bombshell announcement. Well, again, much more news ahead at 4 o'clock. Stay with Fox 11 News. Alex Michelson and Christine